I didn't know that the HOA had demolished my entire mountain mansion until the moment I saw the drone footage blowing up on social media. My heart dropped like a stone into an endless well. Every beam, every wall, every memory my family had built over decades gone. And the worst part, I had worked my entire life to make that place mine. I had clawed my way from nothing, poured sweat and late nights into building something that was more than a house. It was a symbol, my grandfather's dream, my family's legacy, and now it was rubble. I remember sinking into the worn leather of my old farmhouse chair, staring at my hands and feeling them tremble. How could they do this? Karen Jones, the HOA president, had somehow convinced the council that I was delinquent on unpaid fines I didn't even know existed. The city's drones had been flying over my land for weeks, and I never got a warning, a call, or a letter. One moment I was a homeowner, proud and exhausted from years of work. The next I was a stranger watching my life get erased from the sky. And then it hit me, the betrayal, my younger sister, Laura. She had signed off on paperwork that I trusted her to protect. Somehow, in some way, I still couldn't fully understand, she had enabled them. Every drone shot, every pixel of destruction screamed her name. It wasn't just Karen's cruelty, it was family treachery layered on top of it. I had trusted her, I had believed in her loyalty, and she had handed part of my life over to people who wanted to crush me. I paced the length of the room, hearing only my own ragged breathing. The mansion wasn't just wood and stone, it was everything I'd built from scratch after years of struggle, a testament to the life my grandfather had wanted me to live. It wasn't just property, it was history, pride, and dreams. And now, in one legal maneuver orchestrated by Karen, it was gone. But amidst the despair, a spark flickered. Anger, clarity. I realized that Karen had underestimated me. She had no idea that the man she thought she was bullying, the man she assumed was powerless, had the patience, the mind, and the grit to play a long game. They thought demolishing the mansion would break me. They thought humiliation would be enough. But all it did was light a fire I hadn't known was there. I pulled out my grandfather's journal, its pages yellowed and full of notes on farming, building, and protecting the land. Every word reminded me of my responsibility, not just to myself, but to the legacy of every Kent before me. I wasn't just going to rebuild. I wasn't just going to fight. I was going to reclaim what was mine, down to the last nail. Every unfair fine, every cruel word, every deceitful signature would be repaid with precision. That night, as the wind rattled the old window panes, and the mountains loomed like silent witnesses, I whispered to the memory of my grandfather, "I won't fail you, Grandpa. Not now, not ever." And in that vow, I found the first edge of a plan. The next morning, I walked through what remained of my property, stepping carefully over splintered boards and broken stone. The wind carried the distant hum of construction machinery, the sound of progress, they thought, but really it was the soundtrack to their arrogance. Karen Jones had made her move, and the HOA had celebrated as if they'd conquered a kingdom. But I wasn't a man who panicked or reacted without thought. I had to understand every angle, every loophole they had exploited before I struck back. Sifting through the HOA's public records, I felt my stomach twist. Fraud, complete, intentional, and calculated. The zoning papers were falsified, property maps altered, signatures forged. Someone had tampered with every line of legality to make them look untouchable. And that someone had used my own family against me. Laura had unknowingly, or perhaps knowingly, signed a waiver that validated their fake documents. My chest tightened, a mix of betrayal and fury so sharp it almost cut through me. I sat at the old farmhouse desk, spreading out the papers, scanning each one with a slow, meticulous rage. Every page was another piece of evidence, another piece of ammunition. I felt the weight of my grandfather's legacy pressing down, reminding me why this land mattered. It wasn't just acreage or timber. It wasn't just foundations or fences. This was family. This was history. This was everything they thought they could erase with forged documents and a party celebrating their victory. And speaking of parties, that's exactly what they threw. The HOA didn't just quietly pat themselves on the back. They hosted a massive event to flaunt their conquest. Karen Jones stood at the center, champagne in hand, surrounded by committee members and neighbors who had been convinced to cheer their supposed triumph. Invitations had included me, of course, a show of generosity, or more accurately, intimidation. I watched from a distance, blending into the shadows, my eyes tracing every smile, every handshake, every overconfident movement. But I couldn't just stay quiet. I didn't need to confront them physically. Confrontation without leverage would be foolish. No, I had to prepare. Let them celebrate their empty victory while I built my strategy. Every camera, every social media post, every bragging photograph would be archived. Every detail mattered. They had left clues about their arrogance, their rush to build, their blind belief that they were untouchable. By evening, I began mapping the entire property, marking where houses had been constructed, where the roads led, and where the HOA had ignored proper legal procedure. I contacted my attorney, a sharp-minded man with a reputation for dismantling fraudulent claims like they were paper cutouts. He didn't flinch when I explained the scale of their manipulation. "This is beautiful," he said. "They've practically handed us the map to undo everything." I felt a dark thrill. Karen Jones had treated my land like a playground. She had celebrated like she owned my life. And now, with every violation meticulously recorded, with every forged document catalogued, the tides were about to turn. I was no longer the victim. I was the quiet force that would reclaim what was rightfully mine, and every move I made from this point would hit like a precise strike. That night, staring at the stars through the broken beams of my demolished mansion, I whispered once more to my grandfather, my voice stronger now, burning with purpose. "They think they've won, Grandpa. Let them celebrate. The real reckoning starts tomorrow." The morning after the HOA's victory party, I returned to the farmhouse, feeling a mixture of anger and determination. Every house they built, every driveway poured, every fence nailed was a reminder of how brazen they thought they were. But now, I could see the cracks in their facade. I began by photographing every inch of the land, documenting the construction from angles they couldn't deny. Satellite maps, drone footage, property lines. I gathered it all. Every forged signature, every illegal permit, every deviation from proper zoning would become a weapon. Karen Jones and her HOA thought they were untouchable, but arrogance leaves traces, and I was tracing every one of them. I called my lawyer, a meticulous strategist named Alan Cross. Alan wasn't flashy, but he had the mind of a general. "Max," he said after I laid out the details, "they've built themselves into a trap. Every illegal step they took is now evidence against them. We just need to hit them in the right order." I spent hours cross-referencing documents, tracing signatures, comparing HOA filings against county records. The deeper I dug, the clearer the pattern became. The HOA had intentionally accelerated construction, ignoring permits, and even falsifying neighbors' consent to make it look legal. It was audacious, and yet, in their audacity, they'd exposed themselves. By afternoon, I began drafting a timeline. Every house had a story, the date construction started, the dates of fraudulent approvals, every violation of municipal codes. Each entry fueled my plan. I wasn't going to stop the construction midway. I'd let them finish, just as I'd decided earlier. The final product would serve as undeniable proof of their scheme. That evening, I walked the property lines, running my hand over the wooden fences, imagining the rightful order restored. My grandfather had fought for this land, and now it was my turn. Karen Jones had built her empire on arrogance, manipulation, and fear. I would dismantle it with patience, precision, and a lawyer who knew how to strike where it hurt. And while the HOA celebrated their victory, I smiled quietly, thinking they had no idea their triumph was temporary. Every foundation they poured, every wall they raised, had unknowingly strengthened my case. They had built my arsenal, brick by brick. By nightfall, I was ready. Evidence collected, timeline mapped, legal strategy forming. I felt the first taste of control. The battle had only just begun, but the first moves were mine, and Karen Jones would soon realize the power she had underestimated. 2 days later, I got a glossy invitation in the mail, gold trim, embossed lettering, the kind of thing you'd expect for a wedding, not a zoning scam. HOA Community Expansion Celebration, mandatory attendance, mandatory, on my land. Karen Jones really had no shame. I knew what this was, a power move, a parade, a chance for her to stand on a stage and pretend she'd conquered the mountain. So I went. When I arrived, the newly built cul-de-sac was packed with people. HOA members in their pastel polos, neighbors pretending they weren't terrified of Karen, real estate investors sniffing for profits. They'd set up banners, music, a catered table, even a champagne tower on land illegally taken from me. Karen stood in the center like she owned the world, wearing a sparkling blazer that screamed attention. She spotted me instantly, her lips curling into an overly sweet smile. "Well, look who decided to show up," she said loudly, making sure the crowd heard. "Max Kent, supporting the future of our community. How mature of you." I didn't rise to the bait, just observing. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You should have signed the paperwork when you had the chance. Now you're just a visitor in what we built." I almost laughed. A visitor? On my land. But I kept my face calm. Let her believe she'd won. Her confidence today would make her collapse tomorrow even sweeter. The speeches began. Karen took the microphone and started her performance, talking about progress, growth, and responsible leadership. Every sentence was a lie dressed in community buzzwords. The crowd clapped on autopilot, too scared of her to question anything. But beneath the applause, I watched the cracks. Board members whispering nervously. Investors clutching paperwork that didn't quite add up. Neighbors wondering why the county had never publicly announced a zoning change. They didn't know what I knew. They didn't know I'd already uncovered the forged boundaries, the fake signatures, the illegal approval stamps. They didn't know this entire party was built on a landmine. And then Karen, because she loves attention more than oxygen, raised her glass and declared, "Here's to the future of our land." That did it. That was when the fury finally cracked through my calm. I didn't shout. I didn't storm. I didn't make a scene. When the speech ended, I quietly walked up to her, leaned in and said, "Enjoy this moment, Karen. It's the last celebration you'll ever have on my soil." She blinked, confused, caught between arrogance and fear. For the first time, she didn't have a snappy comeback. I walked away feeling the shift. The party kept going, but something had changed. Karen felt it too, the beginning of the end. The party went on, laughter and music filling the air, but I couldn't just watch quietly anymore. Every toast, every plastic smile, every fake cheer was like salt in a wound. I'd been patient, but patience had its limit. I stepped onto the newly poured driveway, my boots crunching against the gravel, and finally I let my voice cut through the chatter. "Do you really think this makes you the owner here?" I shouted, my words echoing. People froze mid-conversation, champagne glasses tilting. "This is my land, every house, every fence, every street corner." Karen spun around, her perfect smile twisting into shock and anger. "Max, you're being unreasonable." I didn't back down. I pointed toward the cul-de-sac. "You threw a party on property that belongs to me. You celebrated theft. And now you're calling it community progress. Look at yourselves. You've been manipulated by your own greed. The crowd murmured, unsure who to side with. Karen tried to regain control, flapping her arms like a bird trapped in a cage. "This is our community. You're overreacting." I stepped closer, voice low but sharp. "Overreacting? No, you're underestimating me. You forgot something crucial. I've been documenting everything. Every fraudulent approval, every forged signature. You think this is a victory, but the real power is in truth, and truth always wins." Her face went pale. She realized the veneer of control was slipping. For the first time, the queen of this HOA felt fear. I could see it in her trembling hands, in the tight set of her jaw. That's when she finally confronted me, not on stage, not in front of the investors, but right on my property line. She spat out her final jab. "If you ruin this, Max, everyone will hate you. You'll be the villain." I met her glare, letting my calm contrast with her panic. "No, Karen. The villain is the one who steals, manipulates, and lies. And you've done all three." I turned and walked away, leaving the party in chaos. The crowd whispered, some stunned, some relieved. Karen barked orders behind me, but the shift had already happened. From that night on, I knew I had the leverage. The groundwork was set. The next steps would be mine, precise and unstoppable. The morning after the party felt different, quieter, sharper, like the world finally understood something big was coming, and I wasn't wasting a second. I grabbed my coffee, opened my laptop, and began what Karen feared the most: digging. I started with the county records, plat maps, transfer reports, zoning decisions, stuff most people never bother reading. But I wasn't most people. Every document I opened pulled another thread loose. Within an hour, I noticed the first red flag. A land transfer approval that never should have existed, signed by a board member who had resigned 2 years earlier. Forgery, obvious. Then another file showed a zoning variance that was approved in a meeting that never happened. I should know. I attended that meeting. It was about potholes and a mailbox height dispute. No land votes, no construction talk, nothing. By noon I had a stack of screenshots and notes thick enough to bury Karen's entire board. But the real bomb dropped when I cross-checked contractor invoices with HOA budgets. That's when I found it. Over $200,000 missing. Labeled as miscellaneous development fees. Fees paid to a company with a name I recognized, because it didn't exist. It was a shell. A fake company created by Karen's cousin. A perfect loop of corruption. HOA money, fake company, private pockets. I leaned back in my chair, stunned for only a second. Then I smiled. They didn't just build homes on my land. They funded the scheme using the neighborhood's own money. I decided to go deeper. Next, I visited the construction site again, this time quietly, recording everything. I walked property lines, filmed the boundary markers, documented each house number sitting squarely on my deeded acreage. Contractors waved at me like I was just another nosy neighbor. Little did they know I was building a case strong enough to level the entire HOA. By evening, I had enough evidence to shake the foundation of their precious community. But I wasn't ready to reveal anything yet, not until the timing was perfect. And Karen, she sensed something was shifting. I could tell by the sudden barrage of emails, fake friendly, overly polite, forced smiles in text form. Just checking in. Hope we can resolve things. Let's talk soon. No. We would talk in court. And when I pulled out the real deed, their entire empire would collapse. The next morning, I woke up to something I hadn't seen in weeks. Karen Jones standing at my gate, arms crossed, foot tapping, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy. Classic Karen intimidation tactics. But this time she wasn't radiating confidence. She looked nervous, like someone had told her the ground under her feet wasn't as solid as she thought. I stepped onto the porch, coffee in hand. She waved, but not her usual smug queen of the neighborhood wave. This was stiff, almost scared. "Max," she called out. I could hear the tension in her voice from 20 yards away. I walked down the steps slowly, forcing her to stand there and stew in her own anxiety. When I reached the gate, she plastered on a smile so fake it should have come with a warning label. "We need to talk," she said. I leaned on the fence. "About what? Your construction project on my land, or the money your board can't account for?" Her smile twitched. "Bingo. I just think we got off on the wrong foot," she said, tone sugary enough to rot teeth. "We could cooperate, maybe come to an understanding." She was negotiating. That meant one thing. She knew something was coming. "Did you get a message from the county?" I asked casually. Her eyes widened just a little, just enough for me to know she absolutely had. She straightened her blouse. "Max, this is going to affect hundreds of families. We can't allow a misunderstanding to ruin an entire community." There it was. The phrase every guilty HOA president uses when they're scared. Misunderstanding. I stepped closer so she couldn't avoid eye contact. "There's no misunderstanding, Karen. You knew exactly what you were doing. You built 96 homes on land you don't own, and you didn't think I'd fight back." She swallowed hard. For the first time since this entire mess started, Karen didn't look powerful. She looked trapped. "You're making a mistake," she whispered. I shook my head. "No, you made the mistake. I'm just cleaning it up." She didn't argue. She just turned, walked quickly to her SUV, and slammed the door harder than she meant to. Gravel flew as she sped off, panic driving her more than the engine. I watched her go, and a quiet satisfaction settled over me. Because if Karen Jones was scared enough to show up at my gate unannounced, then phase 2 of my plan was working perfectly. That evening, when the dust settled and Karen's SUV was long gone, I went back inside the farmhouse. The house felt heavier than usual, like it was holding its breath. Maybe I was too. I opened the old trunk at the foot of my bed, the one my grandfather left me. Inside were things most people would have thrown away. Faded photos, military medals, ration cards, worn notebooks, and maps with hand-drawn lines marking every inch of the land he had protected with his life. He was tough, quiet, disciplined, everything I was trying to be now. I held one of his medals between my fingers. Bronze, cold, solid. He earned it overseas, but the real battle he cared about was right here, this soil, these fences, this family land. I remembered being 10 years old, sitting next to him on the tractor. He told me, "Max, land is memory. Once you lose it, you lose the stories that go with it." Back then it sounded poetic. Now it felt like a warning. Karen and her HOA weren't just building houses. They were trying to erase his story, our story, and replace it with cookie-cutter homes, HOA rules, and artificial community values printed in glossy brochures. They thought they could bury a legacy with concrete. But they didn't know what kind of man my grandfather was, or the kind of man he raised me to be. I unfolded one of the oldest maps, the one drawn by my grandfather's own hand. The boundaries were clear, the signatures were authentic. The proof was undeniable. They forged paperwork. He left the truth. The anger hit me again, but this time it wasn't the wild, burning kind. It was sharp, focused, controlled. The kind of anger that doesn't explode. It aims. I tucked the map safely back into the trunk and closed it gently, almost like I was sealing a promise. This wasn't just about stopping the HOA anymore. This was about defending a veteran's work, a lifetime of sweat, sacrifice, and discipline. The kind of legacy people like Karen never understood. And as I stood there in the dim glow of the farmhouse lamp, I made a quiet vow to the man who taught me resilience. I won't let them rewrite our history, Grandpa. Not while I'm still breathing. The next morning, the air smelled like rain and sawdust, the kind that drifts from half-built houses. From my porch, I watched the HOA's construction crews swarm across my fields like ants, hammering, drilling, laughing like they already owned the place. But now I had something they didn't know I had. The real map, the one my grandfather had drawn. The one the forged zoning documents could never compete with. I drove into town with that old map rolled carefully in a tube on the passenger seat. Today wasn't about action. Today was about confirmation. At the county records office, the clerk, an older man named Brent, looked up from his coffee when I laid the map on the counter. "That's not one I've seen in years," he murmured. "Look closer," I said. He adjusted his glasses, tracing the boundary lines with his finger. "And Max, this signature, this is your grandfather's handwriting." I nodded. "And what about this one?" I tapped the forged HOA map. Brent frowned. "No way. That's not the same notary stamp. The date format is wrong. And this signature, this is traced. Poorly." My chest tightened, not with fear, but with quiet triumph. So it was true. The HOA hadn't made a mistake. They hadn't misunderstood. They had faked the documents outright. Fraud. Forgery. Intentional land theft. Criminal. I asked Brent for certified copies of everything. He printed them with a seriousness that told me he understood exactly what was at stake. As he handed them to me, he whispered, "Max, whatever they did here, they're in deep trouble." I didn't smile, but inside, something clicked into place, like a gear finally locking. Outside, I paused on the courthouse steps, the wind ruffling the edges of the newly printed documents. This was the moment everything changed. Not emotionally, not spiritually, legally. Karen could scream, posture, and throw HOA parties all she wanted. The board could build houses, sign contracts, and march around like little dictators. But when it came to the law, to the real boundaries, to the real owner, I had them pinned. I walked back to my truck with a new clarity. This wasn't the end of their fraud. This was the beginning of my counterattack. And the next step? Find a lawyer who could weaponize this truth better than any HOA ever could. Finding a lawyer wasn't difficult. Finding the right lawyer, one capable of turning forged documents into a legal nuke, was another story. But I knew exactly who I needed. Liam Rourke. People in town whispered his name the same way soldiers whisper the name of a weapon they respect. Sharp-minded, impossibly calm, and strategic to the point of intimidation. He had a reputation for dismantling opponents without ever raising his voice, just like an anime villain who planned 12 moves ahead. When I walked into his office, he was sitting with his back to me, reading something on a tablet. He didn't turn around when he spoke. "You're Max Kent." Not a question, a statement. "That obvious," I said. Now he turned, dark eyes glinting with interest. "Only one man in this county currently has 96 illegal homes sitting on his property." I sat. "So you know." "Oh, I know," he said, lacing his fingers. "The entire HOA world is buzzing. Karen Rose claimed you donated the land, which is hilarious considering you didn't." I slid the folder across the desk, Brent's authenticated copies, the real map, and the forged one. Liam flipped through everything slowly, carefully, and then he leaned back in his chair, exhaling one soft breath. "They're done." That was all he said. Just 2 words. But those 2 words washed through me like justice calling from a distance. "You're sure?" I asked. Liam raised an eyebrow. "Max, this isn't sloppy fraud. This is artless fraud. Whoever forged these signatures used a trace template and didn't even match the county date formatting. This case won't just win, you'll own every structure they built." My heart thumped. So the rumors I'd heard about judges awarding structures to landowners, they might apply to me, Liam continued, "but we don't file yet." "Why not?" "Because you're letting them finish construction, correct?" I nodded. "Good. The more completed structures there are, the larger the damages, and the bigger your future asset base." He tapped the forged map with one finger. "We wait until they're fully financially entangled, until every buyer is locked into contracts, until every penny is invested." He smiled without warmth. "Then we crush them." Something about the calm, clinical way he said it made the air feel colder. "Max," he added, "you came to the right person, but you need to prepare yourself." "For what?" "The HOA hasn't realized what you know. When they do, they'll panic. They'll escalate. They'll get loud." He leaned forward. "And that's when you stay quiet, because the quieter you are, the scarier you become." I nodded slowly. He was right. Let them build. Let them celebrate. Let them dig their own grave one shovel of concrete at a time. We would strike when everything was in place. And when we did, the entire neighborhood would feel it. The next week, word spread across the valley. The HOA was throwing a massive celebration. They called it a Community Expansion Achievement Gala. In reality, it was a victory parade for themselves. An ego fest held right on my land, as if the stolen acres were their personal trophy. Banners hung from unfinished rooftops. String lights were wrapped around the new lampposts. Round tables covered in faux gold cloth dotted the area like they were hosting a royal banquet. And at the center of it all was Karen Rose, preening like a queen in a cheap tiara she absolutely bought herself. The invitation they sent me was a joke, a pathetic attempt to flaunt their success. But Liam insisted I go. "Let them underestimate you," he had said. "Your silence is the sharpest knife." So I went. I stepped onto my own land and watched the HOA board members greet each other with champagne flutes and smug smiles. Karen spotted me from across the gathering and strutted toward me with exaggerated confidence. "Well, well," she cooed. "Look who finally decided to show up. Hope you're enjoying the progress on our new community." The way she emphasized it made the word feel like a slap. "I'm observing," I said calmly. She laughed. High, shrill, fake. "Observe all you want. These homes are already sold out. Face it, Max, you're just a farmer who didn't keep up with the times. We're improving this land." My land. The land my grandfather bled for. She had no idea the storm waiting for her. Behind her, HOA members clapped as they unveiled a giant poster of the future community. 96 shiny houses, paved streets, a smiling, photoshopped family walking a golden retriever. I felt my jaw tighten. Let them gloat. Let them feel invincible. It would make the fall even sweeter. But then Karen pushed too far. She stepped in closer, lowering her voice to a condescending whisper. "You know, you should thank me. Without us, your land would still be—" What did the zoning committee call it? Oh yes, underutilized rural wasteland. Something inside me snapped. I didn't yell. I didn't lose control. I simply stepped forward, looked her dead in the eyes and said, "You're celebrating on borrowed land, Karen. And the bill is coming." Her smirk faltered just for a second, a crack in her confidence. I saw it. Before she could respond, the microphone screeched to life on the stage. "Everyone, a toast to the future residents of Cedar Ridge Meadows." Cheers erupted. Karen regained her bravado and walked away with that fake laugh of hers, pretending she had won something. But she hadn't. While they toasted imaginary victories, I noticed something important. Their construction was almost complete. A few finishing touches. A handful of inspections. A couple of certificates. They were so close to the end, which meant my beginning was almost here. I slipped away from the noise and called Liam. "They're nearly done," I told him. His voice stayed smooth and controlled. "Good. Then we're nearly ready." I hung up, watching the lights dance across the unfinished houses. Let them drink. Let them celebrate. The higher they climbed tonight, the harder they would fall in court. The morning after the HOA's delusional gala, I drove into the city with one purpose: to unleash Liam. His office sat on the top floor of a glass building, sleek, quiet, and intimidating, just like him. Liam wasn't just a lawyer, he was a strategist, a tactician, the kind of man who could slice through a courtroom with a single sentence. People said he reminded them of an anime mastermind. Calm, elegant, dangerous. I walked in, and he didn't even look up from the stack of documents he was dissecting. "They're finished with 89 houses," he said. His voice always sounded like he already knew the future. 96 total, I replied. "They'll be done in a week." He finally lifted his eyes, sharp, calculating. "Good, then it's time to begin." He slid a folder toward me. Inside it were copies of the fraudulent zoning papers, the forged boundary map, the illegal signatures, the edited digital survey, every lie the HOA thought they'd buried. Every weapon we needed. Karen Rose hired a new attorney, Liam added, leaning back in his chair. A loud one, flashy, thinks confidence is a substitute for competence. Typical, I muttered. Liam smirked. Oh, Max, you're going to enjoy this. He spent the next 2 hours outlining the strategy. We'd wait until the final inspection, then file the lawsuit before they could sell any homes, then reveal the real deed in open court, then expose the forgery, then hit them with environmental violations, property encroachment, and financial fraud, then request full possession of all structures built unlawfully on my land. Not demolition, possession. My grandfather's revenge carried out through the law. Liam's confidence was unsettling in the best way. They'll come in with arrogance, he said. They'll expect you to break, to beg, to negotiate, and Karen's lawyer will try to bury us in theatrics. Let him, I said. I've seen what she surrounds herself with. He nodded. It'll be a duel, him shouting, me dismantling. He tapped the papers with one finger. Once we file this, there's no going back. I've been ready since the day they poured the first foundation. Before I left, Liam added one more thing, something that hit deeper than I expected. Your grandfather would have been proud, not because you're fighting, but because you're doing it the right way. I swallowed hard. Let's finish this. As I drove back home, the half-finished subdivision stretched across my land like a scar. Workers hammered, machines hummed, houses stood proudly in rows. They had no idea their victory parade was already over. By the end of the week, the last roof tile would be nailed into place. And when that final hammer fell, our legal war would begin. The morning the last house was completed, I felt the shift in the air. The HOA didn't know it yet, but the countdown on their empire had begun. Liam called me at exactly 9 a.m. It's filed, he said, and Karen's lawyer already responded. He wants a pre-hearing discussion. I knew what that meant. He wanted to intimidate us before stepping foot in an actual courtroom. Let him talk, I told Liam. Talk? Liam scoffed. Max, he doesn't talk. He performs. I could almost hear his smirk, which is perfect, because I dismantle performers. By noon, we were sitting in a conference room across from Karen's representation, a tall, loud man named Paul Granger, with a blindingly bright tie, and the personality of someone who thought yelling equals winning. Karen sat beside him with her usual smug posture, arms crossed, chin up, like she owned the oxygen in the room. Liam, on the other hand, arrived like he always did, calm, slow, confident. He adjusted his cufflinks, sat down and spoke first. We're here to clarify the situation civilly, Liam said, voice steady. But if you prefer theatrics, we can do that too. Paul immediately leaned forward. This lawsuit is ridiculous. The HOA has full jurisdiction over the... Liam raised one finger. It silenced the room. Your map is forged, he said quietly. Your zoning approval is illegal. Your boundary lines are fake. And the land you built 96 homes on, he tapped the folder in front of him, is owned entirely by my client. Paul blinked, thrown off by how fast Liam cut through his opening speech. Karen jumped in, loud and sharp. That land is community property. Max abandoned... Stop. Liam didn't even look at her. You're not a lawyer. The whole room tensed. Paul tried to recover by laughing. Look, this young farmer doesn't understand. He understands perfectly, Liam said. You, however, do not understand what happens when you knowingly build on private land. Or what happens when that private landowner decides he wants everything returned. Paul's face reddened. We acted in good faith. Liam slid a document across the table. The survey timestamp showed the HOA had been informed of the real boundary before they began construction. Good faith? Liam repeated. You forged signatures. You edited government files. You trespassed. Then he leaned in, voice dropping lower. And the court will see every bit of it. Karen's confidence cracked for the first time. She swallowed, staring at the papers like they were explosives. Paul tried to regain ground, but Liam wasn't done. "We're not negotiating," he said calmly. "We're not compromising. We are taking back the land, and everything built on top of it." The silence afterward was suffocating. Paul forced a shaky smile. You think you can win this?" Liam stood, buttoning his jacket. "I don't think I know." He nodded for me to follow. As we left the conference room, I glanced back. Karen sat stiff and pale, gripping her chair like it was the only solid thing she had left. For the first time, she realized she wasn't fighting a farmer. She was fighting the rightful owner, with a strategist she couldn't intimidate. And that was only the pre-hearing. The real war hadn't even begun. The next morning, Liam called me before sunrise. "Paul filed a motion to dismiss," he said flatly. "Which means he's desperate." I rubbed my eyes. "Already?" "People who know they're losing try to end the game early," he replied. "But don't worry, we're going to let him dig his own grave in court today." By the time we arrived at the courthouse, Karen and her lawyer were already there. Karen wore a bright red blazer, power color, intimidation tactic, but the way her fingers tapped against her purse told the truth. She was shaken. Paul strutted in behind her, loud as ever, his voice echoing through the hall. "I'm telling you, Karen, he doesn't have a case. The judge will toss this out immediately." He said it loudly enough for us to hear. It was for show. Everything he did was for show. Liam walked past him without even acknowledging the noise. His silence was louder than Paul's shouting. Inside the courtroom, the judge took his seat, and the tension settled like dust. Paul sprang up first. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss this case on the grounds that Mr. Kent has no proof." He hadn't even finished the sentence when Liam rose, adjusting his jacket slowly, almost theatrically. "Your Honor," he said, "my colleague seems confused about where he is. This is a courtroom, not a talent show. If he's going to make accusations, he'll need something more substantial than volume." A couple people in the room stifled a laugh. Paul turned red. "Objection." "Overruled," the judge said immediately. "Sit down, Mr. Granger." Karen's head snapped toward Paul in panic. Liam stepped forward, placing a thick binder on the evidence table. "For starters," he said, "here are 15 certified surveys showing the land belongs entirely to my client, Mr. Kent." He placed another document down. "And here are emails from the county inspector, emails the HOA ignored." Another. "And here is photographic proof that the HOA was informed of the true boundary before construction began. The timestamps are clear." Another. The stack kept growing. The sound of papers hitting the table echoed like gunshots. Paul's hands started shaking. Karen looked like she was shrinking. Then the judge leaned forward. "Mr. Granger, did your client knowingly build homes on private land after being warned?" Paul tried to speak. No sound came out. "Did your client falsify zoning documents?" The judge pressed. Karen whispered something frantically, but Paul just shook his head. He had nothing. Liam stepped in smoothly. "Your Honor, we also have evidence of forged signatures, county files altered after approval, and unauthorized land use signed without Mr. Kent's consent." The judge exhaled slowly, removing his glasses. "Mr. Granger, this is no motion to dismiss. This is a catastrophe." Karen's breathing went uneven. She wrapped her arms around herself like she could hold her world together with her bare hands. Then the judge delivered the blow. "This case will proceed to a full trial, and based on what I've seen, the HOA should prepare for severe consequences." Liam nodded respectfully. Paul collapsed back into his chair. Karen just stared at me with wide, hollow eyes. And for the first time since they stole my land, I felt the momentum shift, the weight lifting off me and crashing onto them. The storm they built was finally circling back. The room went silent as my lawyer slid the final map onto the evidence screen. It showed every single one of the 96 homes, color-coded, labeled, time-stamped. And right through the middle of all of them, my boundary line, untouched since the 1970s. Karen Rose leaned forward like she expected some miracle twist that would save her. Max Kent kept shaking his head, whispering to the other board members, all of whom looked like they wanted to sink into the floor. The judge cleared his throat. Mr. Malik, you're telling me the HOA built 96 homes on land that wasn't theirs, and they never bothered to verify? My lawyer nodded. They trespassed, they constructed, and they attempted to seize the land through intimidation and fraudulent paperwork. We're seeking damages for unlawful construction, property theft, and attempted extortion. Karen jumped up. That's ridiculous. We've invested millions. He can't just take them back now. The judge cut her off. Ma'am, sit down. She sat hard. Then the judge looked straight at me. Mr. Malik, legally, the property is yours. They built on your land at their own risk. Max shot up this time. There has to be another option. Mediation, settlement. The judge sighed. There is an option, but it's up to Mr. Malik. Everyone turned toward me. All 96 families, all the HOA board members, even Karen, suddenly quiet, like she realized she no longer had any power. My lawyer whispered, You don't have to do anything. You can take everything. It's all legal. But that wasn't why I came this far. I waited for the judge's permission, then stood. I'm not here to take anyone's home, I said, but the HOA tried to destroy my life. They ignored every warning, every call, every document. They treated me like I didn't exist. Karen's eyes narrowed. I continued. So here's what I want. You finish the construction. You pay for every inch you trespassed. And the HOA, this entire board, disbands permanently. No more fake fines. No more intimidation. No more threats. Gasps filled the room. And, I added, you pay damages for 3 years of harassment. Karen slammed her hand on the table. Absolutely not. That's extortion. The judge stared at her. Ma'am, that's called a settlement. And considering the alternative is losing all 96 properties, you might want to reconsider. Silence. Max slowly exhaled, defeated. What number are you asking for? My lawyer handed him the sheet. Karen looked over his shoulder, and her face drained of color. This is insane, she whispered. It's cheaper than losing everything, my lawyer replied. The judge folded his hands. If the HOA refuses, I move to immediate ruling. All eyes returned to Karen. She trembled. She clenched her jaw. And then, for the first time since this nightmare started, she nodded. We accept. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. It was over. But the best part, Karen didn't know what was coming next. Because accepting the settlement meant all their internal emails, hidden communications, and fake anonymous complaint logs would be turned over for review. And everything she said about me, everything she tried to pin on me, was about to become public record. Karen looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under her. The judge's gavel hadn't even cooled yet, and already the courtroom was swarming, lawyers whispering, board members pacing, homeowners crying or praying or arguing. But me? I just stood there, calm for the first time in months. Max Kent approached slowly, hands up like he was walking toward a wild animal. Listen, Malik, we didn't know. Karen handled the documents. She told us the land survey was clean. My lawyer stepped closer. You signed the approvals. All of you. Ignorance isn't a defense. Max glanced back at the other board members who were too busy panicking to back him up. Then Karen stormed over, her heels slamming the floor. You think you won? You think destroying an entire HOA makes you a hero? She snapped. I stared at her. Karen, I didn't destroy anything. You did. She laughed way too loudly. This isn't over. You think those homeowners won't come after you once they realize you own the land under their houses? You think they'll trust you? I leaned in just enough for her to hear. Karen, they already trust me more than you. Her smile evaporated. Because behind us, a group of homeowners approached. One woman, mid-50s, tired, furious, stepped up. You lied to us, she told Karen. You said the land was secured. You said all permits were approved. Karen stiffened. Everything was approved. The county messed up, not me. My lawyer raised an eyebrow. Interesting claim, because the county's verified communication logs show you forged 2 signatures. The homeowners gasped. Karen froze. For once, she had nothing to say. The woman folded her arms. We want Karen removed immediately, permanently. Max swallowed hard. That's already happening. Karen spun around. You can't remove me. I am this HOA. No, I said softly. You were. She glared at me like she wanted to set me on fire. But the fight was gone. Everyone had turned on her. Even the board members who worshipped her were avoiding eye contact. Then the court clerk approached my lawyer. Sir, per the settlement terms, we'll need all HOA communications submitted within 48 hours. Emails, messages, complaint logs, internal memos. Karen's face drained white. 48 hours. Everything she hid, everything she forged, everything she manipulated was about to surface. Max gently placed a hand on her shoulder. Karen, give them the files. She jerked away. I'm not giving them anything. You can't force me. The clerk pointed to the judge's signed order. We can, and we will. Karen's hands shook. Her voice trembled. This is harassment. This is... It's the law, I said. She snarled, teeth clenched. You'll regret this, Malik. I turned away. I already regretted letting you push me around for a year. That ends today. As the courtroom emptied, my lawyer whispered, You know, once those files come out, this case might get even bigger. Criminal bigger. I nodded slowly, because I already knew. Karen hadn't just broken HOA rules. She'd broken real laws. And the walls she built so confidently, they were all about to collapse. By the time I stepped outside the courthouse, the news vans were already swarming. Reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing, mics shoved forward like spears. But none of them were aimed at me. They were aimed at Karen. She tried covering her face with a folder, pushing reporters aside as she stumbled toward her car. Mrs. Jones, did you forge county documents? Is it true the HOA may face criminal charges? Were you aware the subdivision was built on land you didn't legally own? Every question hit her like a stone. She shoved past them, voice cracking. No comment, move, move. Max and the remaining board members followed behind her, silent, humiliated, broken. I watched them scatter, the empire collapsing right in front of me. My lawyer nudged me. You don't have to talk to the press. I know. Do you want to? I shook my head. They'll hear the truth soon enough. He nodded, satisfied. The judge will send the final certified orders by tomorrow. Once you get them, everything shifts. They can't touch a single blade of grass on that land without your approval. For the first time in months, I felt air reach my lungs. Real air. Free air. As we walked toward the truck, a small group of homeowners approached me carefully, like I might still be the villain Karen painted me as. One of them, a man in his 40s, stepped forward. Malik, we didn't know. She told us you were dangerous, that your grandfather stole this land. She even said you were planning to sue us just for existing. I exhaled slowly. That was never true. I never wanted a fight. I just wanted my land respected. The man nodded, shame washing over him. We're sorry. Another homeowner, a young mom holding a toddler, added softly, If you ever need us to testify, we will. Karen scared us, but we're done letting her control everything. I managed a small smile. Thank you, that means more than you know. They walked away, heads down, carrying the weight Karen left behind. My lawyer opened the truck door. You realize what this means, right? What? You didn't just beat the HOA, you shifted the balance. I looked back at the courthouse, where Karen was still yelling at a reporter who refused to stop filming. The Queen had fallen, and everyone knew it. But deep inside, I knew this wasn't over. Tomorrow the documents would arrive. And when they did, the real reckoning would begin. The next morning, the certified court documents arrived, crisp and authoritative. I tore the envelope open, feeling the weight of every signature, every embossed seal, every line typed in formal legalese. Karen Jones and her HOA were officially stripped of all claims to the land. Every house they'd built without my permission, every fence, driveway and mailbox, now legally belonged to me. I couldn't help but smile as I read the words aloud to myself. All structures constructed on the disputed property are hereby transferred to the rightful owner, Max Kent. The HOA and its officers are prohibited from entering, modifying, or interfering in any way with the property. It was beautiful, but I knew the psychological battle was only beginning. Karen had humiliated, manipulated, and spread lies about me for months. She thrived on chaos and control. Her empire had crumbled, but her bitterness would linger. I drove out to the property, inhaling the earthy scent of freshly turned soil. The houses sat silently, like unfinished puzzles frozen in time. The neighborhood watched from a distance, whispering among themselves. Some were curious, some were afraid, and some, finally, were starting to realize the truth. I walked through the main house, the one closest to the old barn my grandfather had built decades ago. Dust lay thick on the floors, abandoned furniture scattered across rooms, evidence of a life lived recklessly by people who never respected my family's legacy. I ran my hand across the old wooden banister, tracing the grooves left by my grandfather's hands. "This was ours," I whispered, "and now it's back where it belongs." My lawyer called from behind, holding a stack of documents. "You might want to act quickly, Max. The HOA's insurance company is already calling. They want to settle damages." I laughed quietly, the sound carrying through the empty halls. Settle? They owe me everything for disrespecting my land. Every dime, every effort, every insult. Outside, the neighborhood seemed to sense the shift in power. No cars drove recklessly near the property. No voices shouted insults over fences. For the first time in months, I felt control. Not just legal control, but the kind that fills your chest and steadies your hands. Karen Jones was out there somewhere, plotting her next move, but this time she had no power. The real estate she had built like a fortress of arrogance now belonged to me. I smiled, thinking of my grandfather, and whispered again, "We did it, Grandpa. We finally did it." And in that moment, I realized that reclaiming the land wasn't just about property. It was about restoring justice, respect, and legacy. The following week, word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. People I had known casually for years started approaching me, some apologizing for doubting my claims, others curious about the legal battle that had just unfolded. The gossip and whispers of Karen's outrageous tactics had finally reached every corner of the HOA. I stood at the edge of the property, looking out over the rows of houses she had once controlled. Each one now bore a different kind of weight, a weight of accountability, of legality, of justice finally served. The neighborhood had learned a hard lesson. Power without respect is fleeting. Karen, of course, was furious. I heard through mutual contacts that she had tried to rally her remaining allies, sending desperate emails, making frantic calls to her HOA board. But it was too late. The court documents had sealed their fate. Her authority was gone, her influence dissolved like mist under the morning sun. I spent that afternoon walking through the property, checking each structure for damage and documenting everything. My lawyer had advised me to create a full inventory for insurance and potential future disputes. Every crooked nail, every misaligned board, every half-painted wall was evidence of her disregard for the law and proof that I was the one who had restored order. Neighbors watched silently from their yards. Some waved politely, some stared, but no one interfered. It was as if they recognized that this land now belonged to someone who respected it, someone who understood the legacy of work, sweat, and care that had gone into it. I paused by the old barn, the centerpiece of my grandfather's vision. Sunlight poured through the broken slats, casting long golden shadows. I ran my fingers along the beams and whispered softly, "It's back. Everything you built, everything you fought for, it's ours again." For the first time in months, I allowed myself a moment of calm. There would be repairs, negotiations, and ongoing cleanup, but the psychological victory had been achieved. The HOA's intimidation, Their celebration of my supposed downfall had crumbled, and in its place was justice, tangible and undeniable. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked across the property and felt a quiet satisfaction. The battle was almost over. Karen's reign of chaos had ended, and my grandfather's legacy, once threatened by deceit and arrogance, was secure. If you want to see how I completely flipped the tables on Karen and the HOA, make sure to check out the full story in the related video. The final day of the legal saga felt surreal. Courtrooms emptied, papers were signed, and the judge's ruling was final. Every house constructed by the HOA under Karen Jones's direction was now legally mine. Not just the land, not just the deeds, but the structures themselves. Years of frustration, stress, and manipulation had culminated in this one sweeping victory. I stood at the front of the property, feeling the wind brush against my face, surveying the rows of houses that had once been a symbol of Karen's audacity. Now, they represented something entirely different: accountability, fairness, and the restoration of rightful ownership. It wasn't just a legal win, it was a moral one. Every corner of the property carried the weight of my grandfather's legacy and the assurance that deceit would no longer prosper here. Karen's defeat reverberated throughout the neighborhood. Reports of her frantic calls, failed appeals, and mounting debts spread like wildfire. Her arrogance had become her undoing, and the community finally saw through the carefully constructed veneer she had built over the years. Meanwhile, I began the painstaking process of restoring the land, making repairs, and preparing the properties for proper use. Each nail hammered, each board replaced, felt like reclaiming a piece of history. I took a moment near the farmhouse, the very heart of my grandfather's vision, and allowed myself a deep breath. The months of planning, documenting, and patiently waiting had paid off. Justice wasn't just served. It was undeniable, visible, and irreversible. To anyone watching who's faced similar harassment, remember this: patience, preparation, and understanding your legal rights can turn the tide. And always document everything. Even when the odds seem insurmountable, strategy can outmatch brute force and intimidation. As I looked out over the property one last time that evening, I felt a quiet satisfaction. Karen's reign of manipulation and chaos was over. My grandfather's legacy was secure, and the neighborhood had learned a lesson that power without respect is fleeting. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of communities fighting back and winning, subscribe to Suburban Secrets. Your voice matters, your land matters, and together, justice can always find a way.